So I don't always get it right the very first time, but it's okay. I think messy is good when it comes to public education in Arizona. All right, it looks like we are live right now. Hi, everybody. This is Jeanne Casteen, the Democratic candidate for Maricopa County School Superintendent. And today I am joined by, first of all, one of my favorite, not just one of my favorite candidates, but like one of my favorite people on the whole entire planet. Background for me, I am a non-traditional student. I started my degree back in the early 90s. It didn't take, that's what I like to say. And so then I went ahead and got married and had a family, and I returned back in the 2000s. And I had to take a stats class, which for me as an English teacher was kind of terrifying because math is not my strong suit. Sorry. And so I went to a woman named Michelle Brennan, who was a counselor at ASU, to help people sign up for classes. And I said, I need all the help I can get because I haven't had a real math class in 20 years. And she was like, oh, Kristin, that's who you're going to go. Kristin Dybvig-Pawelko. And I was like, what's her name? And she said, don't worry about that. Difficult name, easy decision. so here we are. And I got an A. I think I might have even gotten an A+ in that class. I'm pretty sure.
You might have. You might have. You were an amazing student. So.
Well, I mean, because you know what? When I first started going to ASU in the 90s, it was like $900 a semester. And then when I went back in the 2000s, it was like $4,000. So come hell or high water, I was going to get good grades the second time around because I was taking out lots of student loans. So I am so excited that Kristin DP is here with us. She's an amazing educator. She still teaches in the Hugh Downs School of Communications, which has a special significance today. So Kristin, go ahead and introduce yourself and give everybody a little bit of background of who you are.
Okay, so like Jeanne said, my name is Kristin Dybvig-Pawelko, she, her, hers. I am the Democratic candidate for the Arizona State House in Legislative District 15. And LD15 is between Scottsdale Road and 67th Avenue, Cactus to the Carefree Highway. And, you know, it's a rough rectangle and there's obviously lots of jagged lines all around. Thank you, gerrymandering. But that's the general area that we represent, or that I would represent. And, you know, it's a really interesting area. We think that it's one of the areas that's primed to switch from Republican representation to Democratic representation. I am really passionate about public education, and that's a topic that most of the residents at LD15 are also really passionate about. So just a little bit about me. I've taught at the Hugh Downs School since before it was the Hugh Downs School, but for 20 years now. And I have 3 kids, and my kids are in elementary, middle, and high school. And so trying to lay a good educational foundation for them is really, really important to me. And, you know, in 2018, I watched teachers, and I actually watched your Facebook feed, right, as you were marching on the Capitol. And that was something that was super important. And it really, you know, rewind, I guess I watched the Ducey press conference in January where he said, we're going to give our teachers this great raise. And it was like less than 1%, which is, it's a joke because teachers had gone without a cost of living increase for so long that a 1% raise isn't even getting to that point. And so, you know, I watched and as we had 70,000 teachers who went down to the Capitol and demanded to get paid for the professional work that they're doing, and you received basically a retroactive cost of living increase that wasn't even guaranteed. And it really didn't amount to what is needed in Arizona's classrooms. And, you know, my daughter's a freshman in high school, and she had 39 other kids in her Spanish class. And she had 36 kids in her English class in a really good, like, fairly affluent area of Maricopa County. And if that's what happens in my neighborhood, or in the neighborhood we send my kids to school, and what's happening in other neighborhoods where, you know, you don't necessarily have the same resources and the same tax base, and parents who are putting in their own financial resources to the public school. So I got frustrated in 2018, and with 3 weeks left, I decided to run for office and gathered signatures and ran, and it was a whirlwind. I felt like it was a sprint, but it was a very long sprint. Uh, so
I can't believe
2020 is a little bit different.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, now it's a marathon, like for real, for real. But
Yep.
you, like 3 weeks to get signatures,
Yep.
that's kind of crazy. Good for you. I love that. Where you're just like, okay, this is probably isn't practical, but my community needs it. I'm just gonna do it.
So the funny part is I actually reached out to LD15 Democrats online. I was like, who's running in this office? Because I feel like even if it was a long shot, and I ran against Heather Carter, who has been a good proponent for public education at times, and at times not as strong as most Democrats would like. But it was so important to me to have a Democrat in every spot, because I felt like if I ran in the Senate, it would help out the House candidates. And I got onto Facebook and I was like, wait, who's running in the Senate? I can't find anybody on the SOS page to volunteer for. I want to, to sign, and I want to volunteer. And so I was trying to volunteer and ended up, running for office.
Well, as the old saying goes, if not you, who? So, and I can't think of anybody better as a public education advocate, and especially, with your years of experience working at ASU. So was it easier this time around to make the decision to run again?
No. Oh, there goes my earpod. It was actually, we were going to move. We had decided that we were going to try and put our house on the market and move into, my daughter's at Cave Creek Unified School District. We were going to try and move into Cave Creek, which is one of 3 different legislative districts. And I was like, I'll support who's ever running. And we were recruiting, and it's hard to find somebody who is willing to put in the time, and who has the right background and, passion to kind of take this on. And so at some point, when I was talking to my husband about this process of recruiting, he kind of looked at me, he's like, we just need to take the house off the market. And so we did. And so I decided in October that, the House races is a completely different story than what the Senate race was last time. It's within the margins. We could do it. We had a Democratic primary in 2018. This year, I am a single shot candidate, which, as we know, historically has yielded additional percentages. We see, LD15 has a lot of Republicans registered who are really passionate about the things that I'm passionate about, that Republicans who really want to fund public schools. And, one of the other things that is super important to me is the environment, and making sure that we have sustainable water in Arizona, and that our groundwater is sustainable. And we haven't really taken a whole lot of action on that. And it's because the majority party has kind of shut it down. And Republicans care about that because they want to make, just like, I think everybody does. We live in the desert, and it's something that we need to address. So I do think that it is a race that we can win. But beyond that, I just think it's so important that we have Democrats advocating in every corner of Arizona for public education, for environmental protections, for, Democratic nominee for president, for all of the county races. I just think it's important that we have advocates at every single level of on the ballot. It's
Yeah, I've been here now, it'll be 30 years next year that I've been here, for almost 30 years. And, right when I got here, I think it was shortly afterwards, Sheriff Joe was elected. I was in the middle, like shortly afterwards, I think Fife Symington stepped down, and it's just been like this kind of endless parade of corruption and really neglect. And I've been mostly living here in like the downtown Phoenix area. And so we sometimes maybe, I hate to say it, but like some of us
Blue
downtown
bubble.
people, we get a little complacent, like if you take a look at some of the votes from the last time around, and races that maybe were lost, it's because a lot of us in Central Phoenix maybe think, well, my neighbor's going to vote, or this person's going to vote, I don't need to worry about it. But everybody needs to get out there and vote. Either way, I've always had a choice, like a good, strong choice of who I want to get elected, you know, and some of these places, I think of you up in 15, I think of, you know, LD25, you know, places that are more on the outskirts of Maricopa County where they don't even have a choice. They're basically, you know, a lot of people register as Republicans so that they can at least choose in the primaries. So I'm so
Mhm.
happy to see that in these traditionally red areas, like in LD15, I know LD13, we've got Mariana Sandoval who's running. You know, we've been flipping things over here in 28, and now Christine Marsh is about to win. So like, I'm so excited that finally people in all these outskirts areas actually have a choice.
Mhm.
Um,
Uh,
so
we talked to a lot of Republicans who are registered that way because they wanted to vote in primaries.
Yeah. And so, you know, through our call time, I'm sure you're, you know, talking to voters every single day the same way that I am. What I'm discovering is that a lot of times they're just rhinos, you know, they're Republicans in name only, and it's just because they want to be able to, you know, connect those two lines on their
Mhm.
ballot, and that's the only way that they can do it. So we've roused this sleeping giant, I would say. Real quick, I want to say Terrence Driscoll is on, and he's saying, let's see, 36 out of 42 of LD15 precincts are in CD6, where Schweikert holds a seat. He's under investigation and is targeted as winnable by the National Party, which is just
Yeah.
so disappointing. But again, it's kind of par for the course. So let's talk for a minute about what, so you are public, well, you work for a university, a public
Mhm.
university, Arizona State, in the Hugh Downs School, which we can talk about in just a minute. What is it going to look like when you all come back? And how is COVID going to affect your instruction come August?
So, you know, I think there's so many unknowns. I think just like the K through 12 schools, we really are not sure what it's necessarily going to look like. I think everybody is kind of waiting to see where these numbers go and if mask wearing turns out to be effective and we see a reduction in cases. We're prepared to teach online in a synchronous manner. We're prepared for returning to in-classroom instruction where we are having half the class on some days and half on the other, and we're doing a synchronous learning environment. Some of the faculty members are going to flip their classroom. They'll have all recorded videos and they'll be doing in-class activities with half the class on one day and half the class on another day. I haven't decided what it's going to look like for me, but I've been teaching online. I first taught online in 1999, which dates me just a little bit. But I've been teaching consistently online for about 10 years. So I'm pretty comfortable with, um, you know, teaching online and what it takes to do that. You know, there's those areas of connectivity that we have with online education. It's connecting the students to the instructor, the students to other students, and the students to the material. And it's similar to an in-person classroom. You just have to think about it in a virtual context. So I'm pretty much ready for, and I think ASU is so fortunate because we have really been on the forefront of that, you know, adaptability and how we do this virtual learning for a long time. I love teaching where I'm at. One of the things that is that makes me so proud of being able to teach where I'm at is that we have served students for a long time who otherwise would not be able to get a degree. So you look at this Starbucks program that ASU had, where I've had students who are managers at Starbucks who were, you know, in their 30s, 40s, or 50s, and this was their opportunity. They'd never had an opportunity before to attend a university. So because of that experience, because we have so many people who have taught online and who have taught for so long online, I think we'll be able to kind of adapt regardless of what it looks like. But we are still, you know, there's still choices and decisions to be made. Masks are mandatory regardless of what happens. They are mandatory on campus at all times unless you're outside and can socially distance. But they're creating outdoor classroom environments that'll be shaded and have technology that we can use.
I love that. You know,
Mhm.
I have one of my favorite types of pedagogies is the Waldorf method of teaching and learning. And we're
I
actually,
remember.
yeah, we're trying to incorporate that here in the Creighton School District. It's Waldorf like, it's called Reggio, which I believe is like a
Mhm.
New Zealand pedagogy. But it's very much about, you know, connecting with the outdoors and always considering um, your carbon footprint. And so I love that. It's just in Arizona, it's not nearly as comfortable to think about teaching outside in August, but I do think that this is a great opportunity for us to expand the way that we think about traditional education, you know, so whether that means going online, whether that means going outdoors, I think that all of these things, or getting rid of standardized testing, I think all of these things are really good opportunities that we're being presented with as the world is turning upside down and we're trying to be nimble and figure it all out. So let's switch gears real quick, because I know too, you just said you have a kid in elementary, middle, and high school. So I'm guessing that's 3 different schools for you. Are they all in the same district?
No.
Oh boy.
We're in 2 different districts right now.
So what does that look like for you? So you had to do Q4 last year with 3 kids in 3 different schools, you teaching online for your students. How did you manage that? That's insane.
I don't know. It got done. Maybe not as well as it otherwise would have. You know, the kids were adjusting. I mean, all of our kids are experiencing trauma right now. And, you know, obviously I feel like my kids are in a loving home. It's not that they're not in a loving home. It's that this is traumatic for all of us. And I think all of us are experiencing certain levels. I know my students were unbelievably traumatized. Hearing their stories over the last quarter of, you know, the spring semester, it is clear that this is making an impact on everybody. And so it's obviously making an impact on our elementary, middle, and high school kids. So, you know, we just got things done. And if they weren't perfect, they were done. And I think now that we're adapting, like it's that traumatic start, but now we're thinking about staying in this mode. How do we plan for the future? And how do we plan to do that kind of virtual, instead of the triage virtual learning? How do we plan for and do actual, you know, constructive virtual learning? Because it can be done. It's just some of the circumstances. And even my students who were in fully online classes that totally prepared to be online were experiencing the same levels of trauma. So it wasn't just a transition in format. It was, we're all experiencing, you know, we're all going through something, and we need to acknowledge that.
Yeah. My husband, you know, finished his work day today, and it was a fairly light day, but he's like, I'm just so tired. And I said, was work hard? He said, no, I'm just so tired of COVID. I'm so tired of hearing Trump on the radio. I'm so tired of, you know, like we're all just like kind of in this fatigue. And I really consider myself incredibly lucky. Like you know, he is still working, and they had a massive cut where he works, but he survived. So, but I know that my students, you know, talking about where you live, perhaps those kids are, you know, every basic need is met. When it comes to Maslow's hierarchy, they're doing mostly okay. But when I start thinking about my students in Maryvale or at North High School, like, you know, some of them aren't doing okay. And I appreciate you saying something about the trauma that they have been experiencing, and how we need to first address that. And I think that we all kind of maybe need to get used to the fact that, at least for this year, well, I've never been a big fan of standardized tests to begin with, because I understand the racial origins of those tests and how they're so biased, and how it's $1 billion a year industry. But like, now there's a real opportunity for us to focus on what it is that our students really need. I guess what I'm curious about too, because you know, here in the Creighton School District, we're actually about to have another emergency board meeting tonight to approve the purchase possibly of devices for our kids, because we know that we're going to be starting off the year with virtual learning. So what does that look like for your college students? I would imagine they're fairly well connected, but how has ASU been able to address that with regards to making sure that their college students are still being connected?
So it's funny, you know, you think a lot of people, I think, just assume that college students have devices, and most of them have a phone. I did reach out to my students and did, you know, when we started, like, what devices do you have? Will you be doing this on a phone or a computer? Just so that we could adapt some of the course expectations based upon their accessibility to the internet. But ASU handed out like over 1,000 devices to students who didn't have devices. They lent out laptops. They lent out just to make sure that we could get through that spring semester. So it's not just, we have, not at ASU necessarily, but throughout the United States, we have a large homeless population in our university students. And that's one of the reasons that, like, when you close the dorms, I'm so conflicted about it, because we do have students who rely on their university, funding in order to pay for housing. And if they're evicted, they don't necessarily have a place to go. So it's a complex problem at the university level as well.
Yeah.
But the university did go out of their way to make sure that everybody had devices and connectivity to finish the semester. And actually, one of the things that is awesome is that we have the highest completion rate of any spring semester.
Oh, well, that's really good news. Yeah, no, you just made me think of, I have a former student that I actually had when I was teaching middle school, and then she ended up at the high school where I was teaching, and she emancipated from her mother and was a foster student, or foster kid. But there are certain protections in place for those foster kids beyond the age of 18. And I think, honestly, I hate to give any credit, but like, I think it was actually Jan Brewer who was the one who signed the legislation to make sure that those students were taken care of beyond that aging out of the foster care system. And had it not been for that, she, wouldn't have a place to stay during breaks and over the summer and that kind of stuff, which was I'm proud that Jan Brewer made that decision. But it makes, so do those foster kids then, those kids who are protected by those kinds of laws, are they not able to stay anywhere on campus?
I don't know what happened this semester. I'm guessing that provisions were made, because that is one of the things that Arizona does do well. Foster kids who are going to university have some support, and they don't necessarily in other states.
Yeah, no, that's.
But there's other situations that would cause somebody to be homeless too, that maybe they're not being supported by the system. We don't have as much of that, like I said, as other universities do outside of Arizona. But
yeah. Okay, so all right, let's talk a little bit. One of the things that you and I bonded over when you were my teacher, and yes, she is younger than me, guys. Okay, like no big deal, but yeah, I was a non-traditional student. Okay, I went back. But one of the things we bonded over was this idea of attachment parenting. I was big into home birth and, just wearing my baby and all that kind of stuff. Do you ever see that kind of play out, or what kind of policies would you like to see that protect the idea of, the idea of moms and babies and pre-K and all that kind of stuff?
Oh, I mean, I would love to see policies that made it easier for extended leave, because we see the benefits of solidifying that, the mother-infant relationship. One of the things I know we bonded over was breastfeeding. And it was such an impactful part of my life. But you see, when children are breastfed, that they end up with less need to go into the doctor. So parents actually end up not taking as much time off work in the back end. So from an economic perspective, it actually makes sense for companies and small businesses to encourage a little bit longer of a leave time up front, because it pays dividends in the end, right? So that we can have that relationship solidified, that baby has some nutrients that maybe will help improve their immune system, so that they're not as susceptible to viruses later on. And it's one of those things that a company could do. I also think that a lot of companies and organizations could support breastfeeding on in their companies by having a space and breaks for that to be possible. And honestly, that was the first thing that really popped into my consciousness about our state legislature, was when the breastfeeding bill was passed. When I was nursing my oldest, I didn't realize that I wasn't protected in public, because of course you should be able to feed your baby anywhere you go. And Kirsten Sinema and Katie Hobbs were really kind of, that's what they did, is that was that piece of legislation. And that's the first time that I heard either of their names and started thinking about this incredible thing that they did.
Yeah, I mean, it's a money saver. If we were able to make sure that our new moms had those protections in place so that they could really take, or for dads too, you
Yeah.
know, there are European countries that make sure that dads have the opportunity to have paternity leave. You know, I still have good friends who are international board certified lactation consultants. My friend, one of my oldest friends,
Me
Janet.
too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, because a little known fact too about Kristin is that she is a La Leche League leader, and
Was.
so was a La Leche League leader. So, you know, making sure that our kids have the healthiest start, it kind of, that was the thing that I loved about your class, was that you understood that, you know, this education of ours doesn't begin when a kid enters their kindergarten classroom, but it's this really holistic idea of parents being able to be their child's first teacher without the stress of you know, making ends meet or being able to buy groceries. We need to make sure that that everybody's protected. And I think that we might even know the same person, Wendy Kleckner, who's Mill Avenue Midwives organization. I've been watching her Facebook, and home births are now increasing because of COVID. So moms who had planned to have a hospital birth are now changing things up because they don't want to give birth alone. So
Yeah.
she's seen a huge increase. And, you know, of course, it's only meant for people who are low risk and who can do it safely. And the midwives in that practice are so, you know, they're experts. They know they're not going to allow somebody who shouldn't be there having a home birth to have a home birth. And so I'm excited that, again, because it's all about looking for silver linings right now. Am I right?
Yeah.
So, okay, let's talk a little bit, because I am a very proud graduate of the Hugh Downs School of Human Communication. Majoring in human communication was one of the best decisions I ever made. I had, in my opinion, some of the greatest undergrad professors that, you know, you guys can fight me because my professors were amazing. You're one of them. And I was privileged enough to be in a class with Dr. Bud Goodall. May he rest in peace.
Yep.
But he taught a class called Communication in the Time of Crisis. And one day he brought in Hugh Downs, and Hugh Downs started talking about how he was invited to watch the first atomic bomb test. And so he decided to go to his public library and research, you know, like nuclear fission and stuff like that, and was like, oh no, this is a bad idea. But because he went to the library, and sure enough, I mean, like there was like a little wooden like wall that separated them from the blast of the atomic bomb. But because of that research that he did, he was like flagged on an FBI most wanted list or something, and they brought him in to ask him questions. He talked about his grandson and how his grandson said, hey, granddad, can we maybe just sail around the world with nothing but the stars? And Hugh Downs was like, yeah, we can totally do that. And they did it a few times. And then his grandson also said, do you think it's possible to make a scale model of the solar system? And it was great because the way that he said it, he said, I knew that was impossible, but I wanted to foster his critical thinking and problem solving skills. And the message that he gave us that day was, as someone who lived through the Cold War and who saw, like, lived in real time with McCarthyism, this absolute danger of allowing fear and ignorance drive our decision making, and with demonizing the press. And I'm forever grateful for that opportunity to have been able to meet him. How about you? I mean, you had to have crossed paths with him at least once. Do you have any good Hugh Downs stories?
Well, I was fortunate enough to have him come lecture in my class, and it was, I think it was, I was teaching public speaking at the time, and he came in and talked about interviews and interview techniques. And, you know, he had, I mean, it was great information, but at the end of the day, he was really instilling how important critical thinking was, and how important it was to, you know, and he talked about the free press and how important it was to have the free press, and how important it was to ask the right questions, and to make sure that you had that research as your background. And, you know, all of these things that I think we're seeing now as being problematic, but he was already thinking and educating students about how to ask those questions. And then, you know, the other thing is, when he talked about his wife and their relationship, like, he was just such a kind soul, and you could see how much he cared about humanity. And his love for Ruth was just something just legendary. I mean, it was and yeah, he was a great man. And I feel really fortunate that I was able to meet him and have him interact with my students. And, I ended up on his email list for a while, where I was getting, email updates about when they moved, and just a great human being who really cared about the world and cared about telling really good stories and true and factual stories.
Yeah, and I feel like now, for somebody like Hugh Downs, who had lived through the Cold War, had seen what happened when Joseph McCarthy went on his witch hunts, was flagged by the FBI as being potentially dangerous. His message is still so relevant today, and we all need to be fighting for, what we know to be as what's right in the world. So, Kristin, let's help people fight for what's right in the world. How can people connect with you on social media? I posted your website actually on the link on this video, but go ahead and say it again and tell us how we can connect or what your campaign needs help with.
So the website is electkdp.com, but I also bought Elect Kristin because for some reason people weren't understanding the KDP because I talk quickly. My email, you can email the campaign at kristin@electkdp.com. You can follow me on social media on Facebook and Twitter. It's Elect Kristin DP, and on Instagram, I'm Kristin for AZ House. And our campaign is looking for, what everybody really, we're doing a lot of phone banks. We have new volunteers signing up. We're doing training to talk to voters and identify voters. And we are talking about different county candidates at different times, but we're doing a lot of, we're talking about you sometimes, we're talking about school board candidates too. I really do feel like this is a team effort. And so if you go to my website, there is a Mobilize link for our upcoming trainings. There's Mobilize link for upcoming phone banks. Obviously there's a link for donations if you're willing to make a donation to the campaign. I'm the first candidate to ever run with traditional funding in this part of the state for the state legislature, which makes it's interesting. There's not, a go-to list of donors ready. So we are, we're building that up slowly because it takes resources to compete.
Grassroots for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Not running a clean campaign, but a traditional campaign up there. So what is your max, in case anybody out there wants to write a max check?
$5,200 per person. So if there's a couple, you can each do.
There you go.
Yeah.
Mine's $64.50. So if you would like to write a max check, or if you want to give $5 a month, jc4mc.com, it would be incredibly helpful. Well, I've gone over time, which I'm not surprised about because I'm just so happy to see your face. It's been way too long since we've been able to see each other in person. Yeah.
I know. But I still have your sweater.
Oh, good. From her campaign launch, I left my cardigan sweater. So that's good. Okay. I'll remember that. Thank you so much for coming on today, Kristin. I appreciate you so much. And honestly, if it wasn't for you, I probably would not have passed that stats class. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm 100% sure you still would have passed, but it might not have been as much fun.
Exactly. All right, everybody. Until next time, I'll see you all next week. Bye, Kristin. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.